Dr. Elias Carter had always been a man of science, someone who believed in facts and evidence over superstition or coincidence. His life revolved around numbers, data, and the pursuit of knowledge. As part of an elite xenobiology research team stationed on Lizera 9, a remote moon known for its shimmering crystalline forests and vibrant ecosystems, Elias spent most days cataloging alien flora and fauna. It was tedious work, but it gave him purpose. Earth needed answers, and this desolate yet beautiful corner of space held the key to solving some of humanity's greatest challenges. Lizera 9 wasn't just any ordinary moon. It was alive in ways that defied human understanding. The air hummed faintly with energy, as if the planet itself were breathing. Trees made of translucent crystal refracted light into dazzling rainbows, while rivers sparkled like liquid diamonds under the glow of twin moons. Every step Elias took felt like walking through a dream world, one where nature obeyed rules far beyond human comprehension. On this particular morning, Elias found himself deep within the heart of the crystalline forest, scanning a peculiar cluster of bioluminescent plants. These plants pulsed rhythmically, almost as though they were alive, not merely growing, but actively responding to their surroundings. He adjusted his visor, trying to capture every detail for analysis back at the lab. The device beeped softly as it recorded spectral data, but something unusual caught his attention. A faint shimmer moved at the edge of his vision. At first, he thought it might be a trick of the light. But then, stepping carefully between towering crystal trunks, he saw her, a figure unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. She stood tall, her skin gleaming like liquid silver under the filtered sunlight. Her eyes glowed faintly, shifting colors in sync with the pulsating plants around her. Long strands of hair cascaded down her back, each strand resembling delicate threads of spun glass. Elias froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. This was no ordinary alien. While the researchers on Lizera 9 had documented various species during their stay, none possessed such ethereal beauty, or such an aura of mystery. For a moment, all he could do was stare, mesmerized by her presence. She noticed him too. Tilting her head slightly, she studied him with equal curiosity. There was no hostility in her gaze, only a quiet intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through him. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful, like water flowing over smooth stones. "Who are you?" Elias asked hesitantly, knowing full well she likely wouldn't understand his language. Still, communication was worth attempting. He raised his hand slowly, palms open, signaling peace. To his surprise, she responded, not with words, but with gestures. She mimicked his motion, raising her own hand toward him. Her fingers were long and elegant, tipped with faintly glowing nails that matched the shimmer of her skin. Before Elias could react, she reached out further, brushing her fingertips against his gloved hand. The contact lasted only a fraction of a second, but it sent a jolt through Elias's entire body. It wasn't painful, exactly, more like an electric buzz, followed by a strange warmth spreading up his arm. Startled, he pulled away instinctively, taking a step back. The alien woman did the same, her expression unreadable, but tinged with what looked like mild surprise. For several moments, neither of them moved. Elias's mind raced. Was this some kind of greeting ritual? Had he offended her somehow? Or worse, had he unknowingly triggered some biological response? He glanced down at his hand, half expecting to see some visible change, but everything appeared normal. The glove showed no signs of damage, and his skin beneath it felt fine. Deciding it was best not to linger, Elias offered a small nod before turning to leave. Yet even as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something he didn't fully understand. Over the next few hours, Elias tried to focus on his work, collecting samples and jotting notes in his logbook. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the encounter. Who was she? What was she doing so far from any known settlements? And why had touching her felt so strange? By late afternoon, When Elias returned to the base camp, he began noticing oddities in the environment. Plants near the site of their meeting bloomed unexpectedly, their petals unfurling faster than usual. Small creatures, usually skittish and elusive, seemed unusually calm, gathering close to the area where Elias and the alien woman had interacted. Even the air carried a subtle vibrancy, humming softly like a distant melody. Though Elias dismissed these observations as coincidental at first, they gnawed at the edges of his mind. Could there be a connection between those phenomena and the brief touch shared earlier? If so, what did it mean for him, for her, and for the fragile ecosystem of Lizarine? That night, lying awake in his quarters, Elias stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his head. He couldn't explain why, but he felt drawn to the mysterious woman. There was something about her, something profound, that hinted at untold possibilities. Little did he know, this single moment of accidental contact would set into motion a chain of events destined to reshape not only his life, but the future of two entirely different worlds. And somewhere out there, hidden among the glittering trees of Lizarine, the woman watched silently, her glowing eyes reflecting both wonder and uncertainty. Whatever force had passed between them lingered still, binding their fates together in ways neither could yet comprehend. The days following Elias's encounter with the enigmatic alien woman were filled with a mix of wonder and unease. At first, he tried to convince himself that the strange sensations during their brief touch, and the subsequent changes in the environment, were mere coincidences. But as time passed, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the growing anomalies around him. Back at the research base, Elias found himself distracted. His colleagues noticed his absent-mindedness almost immediately. Dr. Miriam Patel, the team's lead xenobiologist, approached him one morning while they reviewed data from recent scans. "You seem preoccupied," she said, her tone gentle but probing. "Is everything okay?" Elias hesitated before responding. He wasn't sure how much to share, or even what exactly he could share. The truth sounded absurd, even in his own mind. How could he explain that a single accidental touch might have triggered something extraordinary? Instead, he offered a vague reply. "Just thinking about some unusual readings I picked up near the crystalline forest. Nothing urgent." Miriam raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. She had learned over the years not to pry too deeply into Elias's thoughts unless he was ready to talk. Still, her curiosity lingered, and she made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, Elias couldn't stop replaying the moment of contact in his head. The warmth he felt when their hands brushed. It hadn't been unpleasant, but it also hadn't been ordinary. It was as though a spark of energy had passed between them, leaving behind traces he couldn't quite identify. And then there were the environmental changes. Plants blooming faster than ever recorded, animals behaving unusually docile, and the air humming softly like a lullaby sung by the planet itself. Determined to find answers, Elias returned to the site of their meeting several times over the next few days. Each visit left him more perplexed than the last. The area seemed alive in ways it hadn't been before. Bioluminescent flowers pulsed brighter, casting soft glows across the forest floor. Streams nearby shimmered with colors he'd never seen before, refracting light in hypnotic patterns. Even the wind carried melodies that resonated deep within his chest, evoking emotions he couldn't name. On his third trip, Elias spotted her again. She emerged silently from behind a cluster of towering crystal trees, her silver skin catching the filtered sunlight. Her presence commanded attention without effort, as if she belonged to this place in a way no human ever could. This time, however, her demeanor was different. There was a tension in her movements, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. Elias stopped short, unsure whether to approach or retreat. After a moment's hesitation, he took a cautious step forward. "I don't mean to intrude," he said softly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace, "but I need to understand what's happening here." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with those glowing, multicolored eyes. Then, After a long pause, she stepped closer. Unlike their previous encounter, she didn't reach up to touch him. Instead, she placed her hands gently against the trunk of a nearby crystalline tree. The tree responded almost instantly, its surface lighting up in waves of radiant hues. It was as though she were communicating with it, not through words, but through touch. Elias watched in awe, his scientific instincts kicking in. "How are you doing that?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. When she turned back to face him, her expression softened, and she gestured for him to follow her deeper into the forest. Reluctantly, Elias complied. They'd walked in silence, weaving through the glittering trees until they reached a clearing bathed in golden light. In the center stood another bioluminescent plant, larger and more intricate than any Elias had seen before. Its petals shimmered like liquid starlight, and its stem pulsed rhythmically, as though breathing. The alien woman knelt beside the plant and motioned for Elias to do the same. Hesitant but curious, he crouched down beside her. As soon as he did, she pressed her palm flat against the ground. The earth beneath them trembled faintly, and a low hum filled the air. To Elias's astonishment, the plant began to change. Its petals unfurled wider, revealing a core that glowed with an otherworldly brilliance. Tiny tendrils extended outward, brushing lightly against both Elias and the woman. It was then that Elias realized something truly remarkable was occurring. The plant wasn't just reacting to her. It was responding to both of them. Whatever connection had formed between him and the alien woman during their accidental touch was now extending to the surrounding ecosystem. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. Before he could process what this meant, the woman finally spoke, or rather, communicated, in a way that bypassed language entirely. Images flooded Elias's mind. Visions of her people, their symbiotic relationship with Lizarionine, and their belief in bioresonance, a phenomenon where life forms could exchange energy and essence through physical contact. These exchanges weren't random. They were deliberate acts meant to create harmony and balance within the environment. But there was more. Through these images, Elias understood that the accidental touch had initiated a form of bioresonance between them, one so rare that it hadn't been documented in centuries among her kind. Worse still, the resonance appeared to have triggered something within her body. She wasn't just experiencing changes in her physiology. She was undergoing a transformation tied to reproduction. Reproduction for her species worked differently than anything Elias had studied before. Rather than traditional biological processes, her kind relied on bioresonance to conceive offspring. Energy exchanged through contact combined with genetic material, creating new life capable of embodying traits from both contributors. In this case, Elias's DNA had somehow intertwined with hers, setting off a chain reaction neither of them fully understood. When the mental transmission ended, Elias sat back on his heels, overwhelmed. He looked at the woman, whose glowing eyes reflected both uncertainty and hope. She placed a hand over her abdomen, and though no visible signs of pregnancy existed yet, Elias knew instinctively that something profound was taking shape inside her. I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered, guilt weighing heavily on his shoulders. "I had no idea." She gave him a small, reassuring smile, resting her hand briefly on his arm. Though she couldn't speak his language, her message was clear. This wasn't his fault. Their encounter may have been accidental, but the consequences were undeniable and potentially transformative. As Elias returned to the research base later that day, his mind raced with questions. What would this mean for her? For him? For the delicate balance of Lizaronine's ecosystem? And perhaps most importantly, what role would this unborn child play in bridging two vastly different worlds? Word of the incident spread quickly among the research team. Some viewed it as a groundbreaking discovery, proof that interspecies cooperation could yield unimaginable possibilities. Others saw it as a potential threat, fearing the unknown implications of such a union. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over as debates erupted about how best to proceed. For now, Elias kept his distance from the arguments, focusing instead on supporting the woman, who introduced herself as Syra through gestures and shared imagery. Together,
They began exploring the changes unfolding within her body and the environment around them. Every day brought new revelations, each one hinting at the extraordinary journey ahead. And somewhere deep within the crystalline forests of Lizarine, the planet itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, as though aware that its fate, and the fates of countless others, was about to change forever. As the days turned into weeks, Elias and Scylla grew closer, their bond strengthened by shared curiosity and mutual respect. Though they came from vastly different worlds, their connection transcended language barriers and cultural divides. They communicated through gestures, expressions, and an unspoken understanding that seemed almost telepathic at times. It wasn't just about exchanging information. It was about learning to see the world through each other's eyes. Elias spent countless hours with Scylla, observing the subtle changes in her body and behavior.
Her shimmering silver skin now glowed with new hues, shifting between soft blues, greens, and golds depending on her mood or surroundings. The faint pulses of light emanating from her hands and chest became more pronounced, especially when she touched objects or interacted with the environment. Plants responded eagerly to her presence, blooming instantly or releasing fragrant scents as if greeting an old friend. Animals, too, were drawn to her, gathering around her in quiet awe. For Elias, these transformations were both fascinating and unnerving. As a scientist, he marveled at the biological processes unfolding before him, processes far beyond anything documented in human research. But as a man, he couldn't help feeling responsible for what was happening to Scylla. Every time she smiled reassuringly or placed a glowing hand on his shoulder, guilt tugged at him. He hadn't asked for this. None of it had been intentional. Yet here they were, bound together by something neither could fully comprehend. Sensing his inner turmoil, Scylla made an effort to ease his worries. One evening, as twilight painted the crystalline forest in shades of lavender and indigo, she led him to a secluded grove where bioluminescent flowers formed natural archways overhead. She sat cross-legged on the ground, patting the space beside her. When Elias joined her, she took his hand gently and pressed it against her abdomen. At first, all he felt was warmth. Then, slowly, a gentle hum vibrated beneath his palm, a rhythmic pulse that resonated with the beat of his own heart. His breath caught as realization dawned. Whatever life was growing inside Scylla wasn't just hers alone. It carried traces of him as well. The bioresonance had merged their essences, creating something entirely unique. A being born of two species, two perspectives, two worlds. Tears welled up in Elias's eyes, though he didn't know whether they stemmed from joy, fear, or sheer wonder. Scylla watched him intently, her expression calm but filled with quiet determination. Through their shared moments of mental imagery, Elias understood that this child held immense potential, not only for her people but for humanity and Lizarine itself. If nurtured properly, it could become a bridge between species, fostering understanding and harmony where none existed before. But not everyone shared their optimism. Back at the research base, tensions continued to rise. News of Scylla's condition had spread beyond the immediate team, reaching higher authorities within the interstellar coalition funding the mission. Some viewed the situation as a scientific miracle, urging caution and further study. Others saw it as a threat, fearing the unknown consequences of such a hybrid existence. Debates raged late into the night, splitting the crew into factions. Dr. Miriam Patel remained one of Elias's staunchest supporters. A seasoned cynobiologist with decades of experience studying alien ecosystems, she recognized the significance of what was unfolding. "This isn't just about Scylla, or even you," she told Elias during a private conversation. "It's about what this represents, a chance to redefine how we interact with other species. We can't let fear dictate our actions." Her words bolstered Elias's resolve, but opposition came from unexpected quarters. Dr. Victor Hargrove, a senior scientist known for his rigid adherence to protocol, argued vehemently for isolating Scylla until the full implications of her pregnancy could be assessed. "We're dealing with forces we don't understand," he snapped during a heated meeting. "What if this, thing poses a risk to the ecosystem, to us. The argument struck a nerve, reigniting fears among some team members who worried about contamination or destabilization. Even those sympathetic to Cyrus' plight found themselves questioning whether humanity was ready for such a monumental leap forward. Could they trust nature, or fate, to guide them safely through uncharted territory? Caught between conflicting viewpoints, Elias struggled to find common ground. He knew quarantine would devastate Syra physically and emotionally, potentially harming the unborn child as well. Yet ignoring the risks altogether felt equally irresponsible. In the end, he decided to take matters into his own hands, enlisting Miriam's help to monitor Syra discreetly while keeping official reports vague enough to buy them time. Their efforts paid off, at least temporarily. With Miriam's assistance, Elias documented every detail of Syra's transformation, focusing on the positive impacts rather than speculative dangers. Data showed that her presence enhanced plant growth rates, purified water sources, and stabilized local weather patterns. These findings provided ammunition against critics, allowing Elias to argue that Syra, and by extension, the child she carried, wasn't a threat, but a catalyst for renewal. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on Elias. Each day brought new challenges, from navigating bureaucratic red tape to managing interpersonal conflicts within the team. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, leaving him questioning whether he was doing the right thing. But then he'd look at Syra, her glowing form radiating strength and resilience, and remember why he couldn't give up. Through it all, Syra remained steadfast, teaching Elias more about her culture and way of life. She introduced him to ancient rituals passed down through generations, ceremonies designed to honor the planet and its inhabitants. Together, they participated in dances under the twin moons, their movements synchronized as if guided by an invisible rhythm. She showed him how to listen to the whispers of the wind, interpreting its melodies as messages from Lizera 9 itself. One ritual stood out above the rest: the bonding ceremony. Performed only during rare celestial alignments, it symbolized unity between individuals and their environment. Syra explained that participating in the ceremony would deepen their connection, not just to each other, but to the planet as a whole. For Elias, it represented a turning point, a chance to embrace his role in this unfolding story rather than resist it. On the night of the alignment, Syra led Elias to a sacred clearing deep within the forest. Towering crystal trees formed a perfect circle, their branches intertwining to create a dome of glittering light. As they stood side by side, Syra began chanting softly, her voice blending seamlessly with the hum of the planet. Elias closed his eyes, letting the vibrations wash over him. For the first time since arriving on Lizera 9, he felt truly connected to Syra, to the land, and to something greater than himself. When the ceremony ended, Elias opened his eyes to find Syra smiling at him, her glow brighter than ever. In that moment, he realized that their bond went beyond biology or circumstance. It was a partnership built on trust, hope, and a shared vision for the future. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And so, as the stars twinkled above and the forest pulsed with life, Elias vowed to protect Syra and the unborn child, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because he believed in the promise they represented. A promise of unity, of possibility, of a brighter tomorrow for all beings fortunate enough to call Lizera 9 home. As weeks turned into months, the changes in Syra became impossible to ignore. Her body continued to transform, glowing brighter with each passing day, and her connection to Lizera 9's ecosystem grew stronger. Plants flourished wherever she walked, their leaves shimmering as if kissed by sunlight even in shadowy corners of the forest. Rivers sparkled with newfound clarity, and the air carried a melodic hum that seemed to echo her presence. It was as though the very essence of the planet responded to her, and to the life growing within her. Elias marveled at these developments, documenting every detail meticulously. He spent hours observing Syra, noting how her glowing hands could coax dormant seeds into sprouting or heal damaged flora with a single touch. The child she carried wasn't just a biological phenomenon. It was a force of nature, radiating energy that resonated with everything around it. Through shared mental imagery, Syra explained that this was no ordinary pregnancy. It was a process deeply tied to the harmony of Lizaranine. The unborn child represented not only new life, but also balance, renewal, and unity between species. For Elias, this revelation brought both awe and unease. On one hand, he felt privileged to witness such a miraculous event. On the other, he couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. What if something went wrong? What if his involvement disrupted the delicate equilibrium of this alien world? These doubts gnawed at him during quiet moments when he sat alone in his quarters, staring at the data logs he'd compiled. Yet whenever he looked at Syra, her calm demeanor reassured him. She trusted him implicitly, and that trust gave him strength. Syra, too, experienced profound shifts. While her physical transformations were outwardly visible, her inner journey was equally transformative. She began to understand humanity, or at least Elias, on a deeper level. His curiosity, his compassion, and his unwavering dedication to protecting her and their unborn child opened her eyes to the potential for cooperation between their species. For centuries, her people had lived in isolation, wary of outsiders who might exploit their resources or disrupt their way of life. But Elias challenged those assumptions, proving that not all humans sought domination over others. Their bond deepened further as they explored ancient ruins scattered across Lizaranine. Guided by Syra's instincts, they discovered artifacts left behind by her ancestors. Fragments of technology, carvings etched into crystalline walls, and relics imbued with residual energy. One artifact stood out above the rest, a circular stone tablet inscribed with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly when touched. When Elias placed his hand on its surface, images flooded his mind. Visions of past bioresonance events, similar to what was happening now. Through these visions, Elias learned that such occurrences were rare but not unprecedented. In previous eras, individuals from different species had formed connections through bioresonance, giving rise to beings capable of bridging worlds. These hybrids had played pivotal roles in fostering peace, advancing knowledge, and restoring balance to ecosystems ravaged by conflict or neglect. They weren't anomalies. They were catalysts for progress. The discovery filled Elias with hope, but also urgency. If history repeated itself, then the child Syra carried would play a crucial role in shaping the future of Lizaranine and beyond. However, the visions also hinted at challenges ahead. Not everyone welcomed change, especially when it threatened established power structures. Conflicts often arose, driven by fear and misunderstanding, putting both the hybrids and their creators in danger. These revelations weighed heavily on Elias and Silna as they prepared for the next phase of their journey. By now, Syra's condition had drawn attention not only from the research team, but also from local inhabitants of Lizaranine. Word spread quickly among native species, sparking a mix of reactions. Some viewed her transformation as a blessing, a sign that their planet was ready to embrace a new era of unity. Others saw it as a threat, fearing that the child's unique abilities might destabilize the ecosystem or attract unwanted interference from outside forces. Tensions escalated when rogue factions, both human and alien, began arriving on Lizaranine, a group of mercenaries hired by corporate interests eager to exploit bioresonance technology, set up camp near the research base. Their leader, a ruthless man named Captain Drexel, made no secret of his intentions. "We're here for the prize," he announced during a tense standoff with the research team. "Whatever's inside her is worth more than any of you can imagine." Elias knew they couldn't let Drexel get his hands on Syra, or worse, the child. Bioresonance wasn't something that could be weaponized or controlled without catastrophic consequences. It was a natural process, one rooted in trust and mutual respect. Attempting to harness it for profit would only lead to destruction. Determined to protect Syra, Elias devised a plan. With Miriam's help, He arranged for them to leave the base under cover of darkness, heading deep into the crystalline forest, where Drexel's men wouldn't dare follow. Scifi led the way, her glowing form lighting their path as they navigated treacherous terrain. Along the way, she used her connection to the environment to mask their movements, causing plants to shift and animals to scatter in misleading directions. Despite their precautions, escape proved difficult. Drexel's mercenaries tracked them relentlessly, using advanced scanners to pinpoint their location. At one point, Elias and Silra found themselves cornered in a narrow canyon, surrounded by armed guards. Just as despair began to creep in, Scifi raised her hands, and the ground beneath them trembled. Crystalline shards shot up from the earth, forming a protective barrier that forced the mercenaries to retreat. Though they managed to evade capture, the encounter left Elias shaken. He realized they couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'd need reinforcements, or a way to expose Drexel's true motives to the galaxy. Fortunately, help arrived unexpectedly in the form of allies among Lizaranine's native species. Creatures large and small rallied to Scifi's side, drawn by the energy emanating from her body. They acted as scouts, guiding Elias and Silra to hidden sanctuaries and warning them of approaching threats. During their time in hiding, Elias and Silra continued studying the child's development. Using portable scanning devices, Elias detected pulses of energy emanating from Scifi's abdomen, waves that synchronized with the rhythms of the planet itself. It was as though the child was already communicating with Lizaranine, forging a bond that transcended individual existence. Scifi explained that this was normal for her kind. Children conceived through bioresonance were born attuned to their surroundings, capable of influencing and being influenced by the world around them. These insights reinforced Elias's belief in the child's importance. It wasn't just a symbol of unity, it was a living embodiment of the planet's spirit. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family bound not by blood alone but by purpose. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the crystalline forest, Elias felt a renewed sense of determination. They had survived against overwhelming odds, protected by the very planet they sought to preserve. And though dangers still loomed, he knew they weren't alone. Together, he, Scifi, and the unborn child represented hope, not just for Lizaranine, but for all beings who dared to dream of a better future. The days spent in hiding tested Elias and Silra in ways neither had anticipated. The crystalline forest, once a sanctuary of beauty and wonder, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and danger. Every step they took was fraught with uncertainty, every rustle of leaves or distant hum potentially signaling the approach of Drexel's mercenaries. Yet through it all, their bond grew stronger, forged not just by shared adversity, but by an unshakable belief in the future they were fighting to protect. Scifi's condition continued to evolve, her body glowing brighter with each passing day. The pulses of light emanating from her chest and hands grew more frequent, illuminating the darkened paths they traversed. It was as though the child she carried drew energy directly from Lizaranine itself, amplifying its connection to the planet. Plants responded eagerly to her presence, blooming instantly or releasing fragrant scents that seemed to guide them toward safety. Animals, too, acted as sentinels, alerting them to approaching threats with calls and movements that echoed through the forest. Elias marveled at these changes, documenting everything he observed despite the chaos around them. His scientific instincts compelled him to record data, but his heart told him this was far more than a biological phenomenon. It was a miracle unfolding before his eyes. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. He couldn't help wondering if he'd done the right thing by bringing Scifi into this situation. Was it fair to ask her to endure such risks for the sake of an unborn child? And what kind of life awaited them if they survived? For Scifi, the journey was equally challenging. Though her people had always revered bioresonance as a sacred act, few understood its intricacies. She often found herself grappling with emotions she couldn't fully articulate. Fear for her child's safety, gratitude for Elias's unwavering support, and a deep longing to see her people embrace this new chapter rather than fear it. Through shared mental imagery, she conveyed these feelings to Elias, who listened intently, offering comfort when words failed. Their alliance with Lizaranine's native species proved invaluable during their flight. Creatures large and small rallied to their side, acting as scouts and protectors. One particularly loyal companion was a sleek, feline-like being named Vela, whose shimmering fur blended seamlessly with the crystalline environment. Vela moved silently through the underbrush, her sharp senses detecting even the faintest signs of danger. Whenever mercenaries closed in, she would lead Elias and Silra to hidden alcoves or trigger natural defenses, crystalline vines that lashed out or streams that redirected their flow to block pursuit. Despite these advantages, evading capture remained a constant struggle. Drexel's men were relentless, driven by greed, and armed with advanced technology. They deployed drones equipped with heat sensors and tracking devices, forcing Elias and Silra to rely on creative strategies to stay one step ahead. At times, Syra used her connection to the environment to mask their presence, causing plants to shift or animals to scatter in misleading directions. Other times, Elias employed his knowledge of alien ecosystems to navigate treacherous terrain, guiding them through narrow canyons or across unstable bridges formed by intertwined crystal trees. One harrowing encounter occurred near a cascading waterfall, where the air shimmered with refracted light and the roar of water drowned out all other sounds. Believing they had finally lost their pursuers, Elias and Silra paused to rest beside the pool below. Syra knelt at the edge, dipping her glowing hands into the water. Instantly, the surface rippled, forming intricate patterns that pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. For a moment, peace settled over them, a fleeting respite from the tension that had become their constant companion. But the tranquility was short-lived. Before they could react, a drone buzzed overhead, its mechanical whir slicing through the serenity. Within seconds, armed mercenaries emerged from the trees, surrounding them with weapons drawn. Elias instinctively stepped in front of Syra, shielding her with his body. "Stay back," he shouted, though he knew resistance was futile against such odds. Just as despair began to creep in, Syra raised her hands, and the ground beneath them trembled. Crystalline shards erupted from the earth, forming a protective barrier that forced the mercenaries to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Elias grabbed Syra's hand, and together they sprinted deeper into the forest, Vela leading the way. Though they managed to escape, the close call left both physically and emotionally drained. That night, as they rested in a secluded grove illuminated by bioluminescent flowers, Elias voiced the fears that had been gnawing at him. "What happens if we can't outrun them forever?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how much longer we can keep doing this." Syra placed a glowing hand on his shoulder, her expression calm yet resolute. Through their shared mental link, she conveyed a message of hope, not just for themselves, but for the future their child represented. "We are not alone," she seemed to say. "The planet fights with us." Her words reignited something within Elias, a spark of determination he hadn't realized had dimmed. He remembered the visions he'd seen in the ancient artifact, the stories of hybrids who had bridged worlds and brought harmony to fractured societies. If history was any indication, then their struggle wasn't in vain. The child Syra carried wasn't meant to belong solely to them. It was destined to serve a greater purpose. With renewed resolve, Elias devised a plan. Rather than continuing to flee indefinitely, they would turn the tables on Drexel and expose his true motives to the galaxy. Using portable scanning devices, he recorded evidence of the mercenaries' activities, their destruction of local ecosystems, their disregard for Lizaranine's native inhabitants, and their intent to exploit bioresonance technology for profit. These recordings would serve as proof of Drexel's corruption, rallying allies to their cause. To execute the plan, they needed reinforcements. Fortunately, help arrived unexpectedly in the form of Dr. Miriam Patel, who risked her own safety to track them down. Accompanied by a small group of trusted colleagues, Miriam brought supplies and crucial information about Drexel's operations. Together, they formulated a strategy to broadcast the evidence across interstellar communication channels, ensuring the truth reached not only Earth, but also key figures within the Galactic Coalition funding the mission. As preparations unfolded, tensions between factions among the research team came to a head. Some, like Dr. Victor Hargrove, argued vehemently against involving outsiders, fearing backlash from corporate interests tied to Drexel's operation. Others sided with Elias and Miriam, recognizing the moral imperative to act. In the end, the majority agreed that exposing Drexel's greed was essential, not just for Syra and the unborn child, but for the integrity of humanity's role in interspecies relations. The final showdown took place near the ruins where Elias and Silra had discovered the ancient artifacts. Knowing Drexel's men would eventually track them there, they set a trap, using Syra's connection to the environment to create illusions that lured the mercenaries into vulnerable positions. When the confrontation began, chaos erupted, but so did unity. Native creatures swarmed the invaders, overwhelming them with sheer numbers and ferocity. Meanwhile, Elias and Miriam activated the broadcast, transmitting the damning evidence to every corner of the galaxy. As the transmission played out, Drexel's facade crumbled. His mercenaries faltered, unsure whether to continue fighting or surrender. Ultimately, the weight of public outrage and the intervention of galactic authorities forced them to stand down. Drexel himself was arrested, his crimes exposed for all to see. When the dust settled, Elias turned to Syra, relief washing over him. Though battered and bruised, they had emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through cooperation and trust. Together, they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope could prevail. And somewhere deep within the crystalline forest, the planet itself seemed to sigh with contentment, its melodies growing softer as the threat receded. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Elias and Silra faced them united, as partners bound not by circumstance but by purpose. The aftermath of Drexel's defeat brought both relief and reflection to Elias, Syra, and their allies. The crystalline forest, which had once seemed like a battleground, now felt alive with renewed energy. The planet itself appeared to breathe easier, its shimmering trees glowing brighter and its rivers humming melodies that resonated with hope. For Elias and Syra, the victory was bittersweet. They had survived unimaginable challenges, but the journey was far from over. The child growing inside Syra represented not just life, but a promise for the future, one they were determined to nurture and protect. In the days following the confrontation, word of Drexel's crimes spread rapidly across the galaxy. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting footage of his mercenaries' destruction of Lizera 9's ecosystems alongside testimonies from native species who had suffered under his greed. Public outrage surged, leading to widespread condemnation of corporate exploitation on alien worlds. Governments and interstellar coalitions issued statements reaffirming their commitment to ethical exploration and cooperation with non-human civilizations. It was a turning point, a moment when humanity began to acknowledge its responsibility to coexist respectfully with other species. For Elias, this shift in perspective was deeply gratifying. He had always believed in science as a tool for progress, but seeing how quickly public opinion could sway toward compassion gave him faith in humanity's capacity for change. At the same time, he knew this was only the beginning. Protecting Syra and her unborn child would require vigilance, not just against external threats, but also against lingering prejudices within human society. Syra, too, found solace in the newfound attention. Though she remained wary of outsiders, especially those driven by curiosity rather than genuine respect, she recognized the significance of what was happening. Her people had long existed in isolation, guarding their secrets out of fear. Now, however, circumstances demanded openness. If the child she carried was to fulfill its potential as a bridge between worlds, then trust, and understanding would need to grow between humans and aliens alike. As the weeks passed, Sayra's condition reached its final stages. Her body glowed almost constantly now, radiating a soft, ethereal light that illuminated even the darkest corners of the forest. The pulses emanating from her abdomen grew stronger, syncing with the rhythms of Lizarine itself. Plants bloomed instantly wherever she walked, their petals unfurling in vibrant bursts of color. Animals gathered around her in quiet reverence, as though drawn by an invisible force. It was as if the entire planet was preparing for the arrival of something extraordinary. Elias stood beside her during these moments, marveling at the transformation unfolding before his eyes. His scientific mind struggled to comprehend the full scope of what was happening, but his heart understood instinctively. This wasn't just a biological process. It was a spiritual event, one rooted in harmony and balance. Through shared mental imagery, Sayra conveyed her emotions to him: awe, anticipation, and a deep sense of purpose. Together, they prepared for the birth, knowing it would mark the start of a new chapter not only for them, but for countless others. The night Caliph was born remains etched in Elias's memory like a dream. Under the twin moons of Lizarine, surrounded by glowing flora and the gentle hum of the forest, Sayra knelt on a bed of bioluminescent moss. Elias supported her, holding her hand as waves of energy pulsed through her body. The air shimmered with refracted light, casting rainbows across the clearing. Native creatures circled them, their presence lending strength and protection. When the moment came, the child emerged into the world not with a cry, but with a burst of radiant energy. Calith's form shimmered like liquid starlight, shifting colors in sync with the environment. Its presence stabilized the surrounding ecosystem instantly, healing damaged areas and restoring balance to the land. Rivers flowed clearer, plants grew faster, and even the wind carried melodic tones that seemed to sing of renewal. Elias stared in wonder, tears streaming down his face. "It's incredible," he whispered, unable to find words adequate enough to describe what he was witnessing. Sayra smiled faintly, cradling Caliph close. She placed a glowing hand on Elias's shoulder, conveying a message of gratitude and unity. In that moment, all doubts and fears melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose. News of Caliph's birth spread quickly, inspiring awe and hope among many. Even those who had once opposed Silra now recognized the child's importance. Scientists from across the galaxy flocked to Lizarine to study Caliph's abilities, eager to learn how such a being could bridge worlds in ways neither species could achieve alone. However, Elias and Silra insisted on strict ethical guidelines for any research conducted. They refused to let Caliph be treated as an experiment or a commodity. Instead, they worked tirelessly to ensure that interactions with the child were guided by respect and collaboration. Caliph's impact extended beyond scientific circles. Stories of its arrival inspired movements advocating for interspecies cooperation and environmental preservation. Artisans created murals depicting the child as a symbol of unity, while musicians composed songs celebrating its role in fostering harmony. Even skeptics found themselves moved by the tangible changes Caliph brought to Lizarine, changes that rippled outward, touching lives far beyond the crystalline forest. Despite the newfound optimism, challenges remained. Rogue factions still sought to exploit Caliph's abilities for profit or power, forcing Elias and Silra to remain vigilant. But they faced these threats together, drawing strength from their bond and the support of allies who shared their vision. Dr. Miriam Patel played a crucial role in organizing efforts to safeguard Caliph, using her influence within the scientific community to rally supporters. Native species, too, continued to act as protectors, forming a living shield around the family whenever danger loomed. Through it all, Elias never lost sight of why they had fought so hard. Watching Caliph interact with the world, its radiant form stabilizing ecosystems, its presence fostering peace, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about protecting a child, it was about nurturing a legacy of hope, of possibility, of unity. One evening, as twilight bathed the forest in hues of lavender and gold, Elias sat beside Syra, watching Caliph play among the glowing flowers. The child reached out to touch a petal, causing it to bloom instantly in a burst of color. Elias turned to Syra, his expression filled with quiet gratitude. "We did it," he said softly. "Against all odds, we made this happen." Syra nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting the same mix of pride and wonder. Through their shared mental link, she conveyed a message of hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone fortunate enough to witness this new era. Together, they had proven that even the smallest connections could yield unimaginable outcomes. And somewhere deep within the crystalline forest, the planet itself seemed to pulse with agreement, its melodies growing softer yet more resonant. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Elias, Syra, and Caliph faced them united. As a family bound not by blood alone but by purpose. Their story was far from over, but one thing was certain: they had already changed the course of history. Years passed, and the story of Elias, Syra, and Caliph became a beacon of hope across the galaxy. What had once been an accidental touch between two vastly different beings had blossomed into something extraordinary, a symbol of unity, understanding, and the limitless potential of cooperation. As Caliph grew, so too did the impact of their existence, reshaping not only Lizera 9, but also humanity's relationship with the universe. Caliph was no ordinary child. From the moment of its birth, it radiated energy that harmonized with everything around it. Plants flourished where it walked, rivers sparkled brighter in its presence, and even the air seemed to hum with vitality. But more remarkable than its physical abilities was its capacity to connect, to bridge gaps between species, cultures, and worlds. Its form shifted constantly, shimmering with hues that reflected the emotions and intentions of those nearby. To humans, it appeared as a radiant being of light. To aliens, it took on forms familiar to their own kind. It was as though Caliph embodied the essence of adaptation and empathy, traits essential for fostering peace. Elias and Syra watched Caliph grow with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They knew they were raising not just a child, but a living embodiment of hope, a catalyst for change. Under their guidance, Caliph learned to harness its abilities responsibly, using them to heal damaged ecosystems, resolve conflicts, and inspire collaboration among diverse groups. Every step it took left ripples of positive transformation in its wake. The crystalline forest of Lizera 9 became a sanctuary for interspecies gatherings, drawing visitors from across the galaxy. Scientists, diplomats, artists, and philosophers traveled great distances to witness Caliph's presence and learn from its example. The planet itself seemed to welcome these newcomers, glowing brighter and humming softer as if acknowledging their shared purpose. For many, visiting Lizera 9 wasn't just about studying Caliph, it was about experiencing firsthand the harmony it represented. Elias played a pivotal role in facilitating these exchanges. Drawing on his background as a xenobiologist, he collaborated with researchers to document Caliph's development while ensuring ethical boundaries were maintained. No experiments were conducted without Syra's consent, and every interaction was guided by principles of mutual respect. Together, Elias and Syra established protocols that set new standards for interspecies relations, proving that science and compassion could coexist. Syra, too, emerged as a leader in her own right. Her people, who had initially viewed bioresonance with skepticism, came to see Caliph as proof of their ancient beliefs, not as relics of the past, but as blueprints for the future. Through patient dialogue and shared experiences, Syra helped mend centuries-old divisions, encouraging her kind to embrace the possibilities of unity. She often stood beside Elias during discussions, their partnership serving as a testament to the power of trust and collaboration. As Caliph matured, it began taking on responsibilities beyond Lizera 9. Accompanied by Elias and Syra, it traveled to other planets facing ecological crises or societal unrest. On one such mission, they visited a war-torn world ravaged by decades of conflict between rival factions. When Caliph stepped onto the battlefield, Its radiant form cast a glow that silenced weapons and stilled hearts. In its presence, enemies laid down their arms, compelled by an overwhelming sense of shared humanity, or perhaps something deeper still. Though peace didn't come overnight, Keleth's intervention planted seeds of reconciliation that would eventually bear fruit. These journeys reinforced what Elias, Syra, and Keleth already knew. True progress required more than technology or treaties. It demanded empathy, understanding, and a willingness to see the world through another's eyes. Each success strengthened their resolve to continue spreading this message, knowing that their work was far from finished. Back on Lizera 9, life continued to flourish under Keleth's influence. Native species 3. Ved, their populations rebounding after years of decline. Rivers ran clearer than ever before, and crystalline trees reached new heights, their branches intertwining to form natural cathedrals of light. Even the wind carried melodies that seemed to echo gratitude, as if the planet itself recognized the role Keleth played in its renewal. Yet amidst the triumphs, there were moments of reflection. Elias often found himself gazing at the stars, pondering the vastness of the universe and humanity's place within it. He thought back to the day he first arrived on Lizera 9, a man driven solely by curiosity and a desire for knowledge. How much he had changed since then. His journey had taught him that science wasn't just about discovery, it was about connection, about finding meaning in the unknown and building bridges where none existed before. Syra shared these quiet moments with him, her glowing form casting soft light across the forest floor. Together, they marveled at how one accidental touch had set into motion a chain of events destined to reshape two entirely different worlds. "We didn't choose this path," Elias said one evening as they sat beneath the twin moons. "But I'm glad we're walking it together." Syra smiled, placing a hand over his. Through their shared mental link, she conveyed a message of gratitude, not just for Elias, but for the life they had built together. Their bond transcended biology, culture, and circumstance. It was rooted in trust, hope, and a shared vision for the future. And then there was Keleth, their child, their legacy, their promise to the galaxy. As it grew older, Keleth began forging its own path, guided by the lessons imparted by Elias and Syra. It sought out challenges others deemed insurmountable, determined to prove that unity was always possible if approached with open hearts and minds. Wherever it went, it left behind traces of light, reminders that even in the darkest corners of the universe, hope could shine brightest. One day, as Elias and Syra watched Keleth depart for yet another mission, Elias turned to Syra with a wistful smile. "Do you think we've done enough?" he asked, his voice tinged with both pride and uncertainty. Syra tilted her head, her glowing eyes reflecting the same mix of emotions. Through their shared link, she conveyed a simple yet profound truth. They hadn't done enough. They had done what was necessary. And sometimes that was all anyone could ask for. The narrative closes with a hopeful vision of the future. Keleth continues to travel the stars, bridging gaps between species and inspiring generations to come. Elias and Syra remain on Lizera 9, guardians of the planet and stewards of its legacy. Together, they have proven that even the smallest connections can yield unimaginable outcomes, that unity is not just a dream, but a reality worth striving for.